So, I'm working on this project that is basically a property trading game. So, what I've got set up so far is just buildings that can be enabled and disabled, and this building here in particular, I've got set up so that the basement cannot be accessed. There's an area that cannot be accessed by anyone except the owner, and if you buy the property, you can then access it because you are the owner, and it allows you to go into parts of the building that the rest of the players can't, and you can exit that area. The next thing I want to focus on is making it so the other players can buy the property from the player that already owns it, instead of, because if the player can only buy it from the game, that can only happen once and then it's done. But if they can buy from each other, and if the player selling can set the price or say there is no price, it's not selling, that's really cool. So I'm going to work on that next. So here inside the building, I've decided on a place where a guest, another player, can come and buy the property if that's going to be an option. So I'm setting up a variety of conditional buttons that will represent different price points that the seller can choose between, which I'll take care of later. And these conditional buttons will each be enabled and disabled as needed so that only the right price point can be pressed, and that should allow the owner to sell or not sell at whichever price they should choose. And we just gotta set the options on here. And so this first option for a price point is going to be 50. If there we go, there's the price of the first price point, and we can make more of these. So we can have one that is 100. So those are all made. Now we will need to put them all on top of each other so that they act like almost as if it's one big button that has multiple options. But before that, we need to work on the channels, as in what causes them to enable and disable and what happens when they activate. So all of these should actually disable on the same thing. Now they each need to enable on a separate channel, and they also each need to, when activated, transmit on another channel. So 2 for each of these total. Now the channels are all there, so all of these can go roughly on top of each other, a grid snap of about 32. And finally this one. So to change ownership when one of these is activated, all of the transmit when activated channels coming from these need to be brought into one channel by way of triggers, and once that way, regardless of which button is pressed, the effect of switching ownership will be the same for each one, and then that channel that they all get plugged into will connect into the switch that represents the ownership of the property. Now I'm going to make sure that all of the devices that cause a change of ownership transmit on the same channel, so that when they transmit, they can all go to channel 23, turn on when receiving from at the switch, and that will cause the new owner to be added, but then also the old owner needs to be taken out. Now this player reference is how we're going to remember the old owner to turn off in the switch. So what's going to happen is activate this on the channel that registers a new owner, 23, and then when this is activated, 24, it will turn off the switch for that player, 24, and the new player is registered, switch turned on, it transmits on 25, and then that will register the new player, channel 25, and that should do the job. Now I need to make sure that the owning player can enable and or disable all of these, or enable one price point as they please. So I'm going to go down into the area where the owner only can get to, and we're going to grab some buttons and I'm going to place a few of them. So all of these are placed, and now what they do is each of these represents a price point to enable, except this one, which simply disables all of them and re-enables each of these buttons, because when you press one of them, the idea is all of those will disable and this will enable. The idea here is when you interact with this one, it should transmit to channel 11, and that means because they go by twos, this will be 13, 15, so on. This one will actually be 10 because that's what disables all of the buying buttons, and then it will enable on 10 all of these set price options. Now we need a channel to have all of these buttons when they transmit to connect to, additionally, so that they can all be disabled and this one enabled when that happens. And speaking of, this needs to disable on 10. This channel browser will tell us what's available. Channel 26, so we can have all of these disable. And we need to place down some triggers so that we get all of these transmitting to turn on or activate channel 20 to transmit on channel 26. Now I need to figure out how to test everything that I've got so far. You'd think it would have to be with multiple players, but I think what I can do is test this myself, because I can test the functionality of changing ownership, because when I am already the owner and change ownership, the act of removing ownership should happen second, and therefore I'll be able to see if it worked even if I am both the buyer and seller. I will drop some money on the ground, and then I just have to start the game and test this stuff out. So what are we testing? First, let's see, can we get into the building without being owner? Cannot. We can buy the building from the game here. Now this ownership devices are not visible in the game, so we can test whether we are owner by trying to enter the owner only area, which we can. We can go into the basement and see the set price options. We can come back out and we can run around this building we have now, and we can, now that's interesting, we didn't disable all of the price point options on the startup of the game. That's going to be pretty important to work out. But in the meantime, what we can do to make sure we test this all right is go into the price points options, set none, and if we go back up here, it should show us no buying options. There it goes. So if we come back down here, we can choose a price at which to buy, at which to sell the property. So we're going to pick 400. We're going to go back upstairs. That's interesting. The door opens and closes. I'll have to keep that in mind. And that has revealed the buy for 400 option. Doing this should remove my ownership of the building and charge me 400. No, that's not true. It won't charge me 400. Actually, that is true because of the conditional button. Nothing seems to have happened, though. Certainly the money isn't consumed. And if I go back down here, I am not the owner anymore. So that worked. So actually the problem of not consuming the player's gold was just because infinite resources was on in the settings. We can fix the problem with the buying options not being disabled at game start by simply transmitting on channel 10 at the game start. The last problem we picked up was the doors not being locked. So I'm going to try to, yeah, the door isn't really locked. So I'm going to go look at the locked device. So I think the problem here is just that the locked device isn't affecting the props of a level instance, which is a little unfortunate, but it makes sense because it's a device that's different. It's separate from the level instance device. I can understand that. It just means we have to do something else to make sure this door isn't gotten through by just anyone. Here's something to test. If we put down a door from a gallery that doesn't just automatically have the opening and closing mechanics, can we get through this door? Probably not. So I'm gonna go into the game and find out if this works. Well, that's all for right now, but I'm planning to continue working on this project on YouTube, and that's the plan.